Hey everyone! Want to unlock the secret to building an incredible team? Today's summary dives into how you can develop an engaged and motivated workforce. We're covering everything from giving effective feedback to ensuring your employees know exactly where they stand. Whether it's praise, coaching, or evaluation, we've got you covered with strategies that will transform your workplace. Tune in to learn how to lead with compassion, keep your feedback productive, and make your team thrive. You already know how crucial employee morale is, right? When your team is motivated, they're not just getting by, they're thriving. And when they're thriving, the whole company benefits. Happy employees mean better productivity, and better productivity means more success overall. But here's the big question: how do you keep your team motivated and make sure they know where they stand? It all boils down to one key thing: quality feedback. Now, let's be honest, giving feedback isn't always easy. As a manager, you've probably had to navigate the tricky waters of giving constructive criticism and praise without a clear map. How much is too much when it comes to praise? Are you really getting through to your team, or are they just nodding along? It's a lot to figure out, and often, managers end up learning through trial and error. But you don't have to go it alone. There's some really solid advice out there that can help you master the art of giving feedback. And trust me, when done right, feedback isn't just another task on your to-do list, it's actually one of the most powerful tools you have as a manager. It can transform your team's work and engagement levels. So, what's in store for you if you dive into this advice? You're going to get a grip on a few key things. First off, there's a big difference between me strengths and we strengths, and understanding this can change how you approach feedback. Then, you'll find out why it's almost impossible to praise your team too much. Seriously, most of us hold back way more than we need to. And finally, we'll tackle those awkward conversations you've probably been dreading, yeah, the ones that make you feel a bit queasy just thinking about them. You'll learn how to handle them like a pro. So, let's start with the basics. You know how it is when you're about to give feedback to someone on your team. It's one of those things that can either go really well or, well, not so great. But the key to making sure it goes smoothly is to first understand exactly what kind of conversation you're about to have. This might sound obvious, but it's super important. I mean, how can you even know if your conversation hit the mark if you're not clear on what you were trying to achieve in the first place, right? Here's the thing: most of us aren't really taught how to give feedback effectively. We just kind of pick it up as we go along, often relying on what we've experienced ourselves, like what our own managers did, or maybe what we've read here and there. Because of that, a lot of people think feedback is simply divided into two camps, positive or negative. You're either telling someone they did a great job or letting them know they messed up. But here's the deal: this isn't the most helpful way to think about feedback. Life isn't that black and white, and neither is giving feedback. What we really need to do is think of feedback as falling into one of three categories: appreciation, coaching, or evaluation. Each of these serves a different purpose and is needed at different times depending on what your employee needs. Understanding this can make all the difference in how you approach these conversations. Let's start with appreciation because it's probably the easiest to wrap your head around. Appreciation is what it sounds like: it's recognizing someone's efforts and letting them know you noticed and that you're thankful. Picture this: an employee just led an amazing presentation this morning. Everything was on point, the slides were clean, and the delivery was smooth. Right after the meeting, you go up to them and say, "Hey, that was really well done. You handled it like a pro." That's appreciation. Appreciation is so straightforward, but it's also powerful, especially when it's given immediately after the event that prompted it. Timing is everything here because when you give appreciation right away, it's fresh in everyone's mind, and it feels more genuine. Plus, when you do it immediately, it helps to reinforce the behavior. The employee knows exactly what they did right, and they're likely to keep it up. Another key thing about appreciation is that it's crucial for building relationships within your team. It's not just about the task they did, it's about letting them know that they're valued as part of the team. This is especially important for new employees or someone who's tackling something new. It's like you're telling them, hey, you belong here, and we're glad you're part of this. It can go a long way in making them feel at home and more confident in their role. Now, let's move on to coaching, which is our second type of feedback. Coaching is where things get a bit more involved because it's about helping someone improve and grow. It's not just about what they did right or wrong, but about giving them the tools and guidance they need to get better. Think of it as being a mentor. Say that same employee did a pretty good job with the presentation, but when it came time to handle the Q&A, they stumbled a bit. Maybe they had trouble articulating their thoughts or got flustered by a tough question. Coaching would be you sitting down with them afterward and saying, you did great overall, but here's where I think you could improve. Next time, try preparing some key points ahead of time for potential questions, so you don't feel caught off guard. Coaching doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out process. Sometimes, just a quick check-in or a bit of advice can make a world of difference. The point is to help your employees see where they can improve and give them actionable steps to get there. It's about fostering their development and making sure they're equipped to handle similar situations in the future with more confidence. And now for our final category, evaluation. This is probably the one that makes most people nervous, both giving and receiving. Evaluation is all about letting the other person know where they stand. It's not about mentoring or offering advice, it's about assessment. For instance, telling an employee, your sales numbers are third on the team, or, based on your performance, you're on track for that promotion, is evaluation. It's giving them a clear picture of how they're doing in comparison to others, or against specific goals or expectations. Evaluation is critical because it provides clarity. Employees need to know how they're doing, whether they're meeting expectations, and where they might need to step it up. But, and this is a big but, you've got to be really clear in distinguishing between coaching and evaluation. Mixing them up can lead to confusion and frustration. If an employee is expecting coaching but ends up getting an evaluation instead, they might feel blindsided or like they're not being supported. On the flip side, if they think an evaluation is just friendly advice, they might not take it seriously enough, which can lead to missed opportunities for improvement. So, to sum it all up, when you're getting ready to give feedback, take a moment to think about what your employee really needs. Do they need to feel appreciated? Could they benefit from some coaching to improve their skills? Or is it time for an evaluation to let them know where they stand? Knowing this upfront will help you approach the conversation with the right mindset and ensure that your feedback is effective and meaningful. And remember, feedback doesn't have to be a daunting task. When you understand the different types and how to use them, it becomes one of the most powerful tools you have as a manager to keep your team engaged, motivated, and always striving for better. How to give feedback with the right mindset. Picture this. You've already figured out what you want to achieve with your feedback, whether it's appreciation, coaching, or evaluation. That's a big step, but now you've got to make sure you're coming at it with the right mindset. Because, let's be real, even the best intentions can fall flat if your mindset isn't in the right place. Think about it, trust is everything when you're giving feedback. If someone doesn't believe you genuinely have their best interests at heart, why would they listen to you? It's like getting advice from someone you don't trust. You're probably going to nod along and then completely ignore it, right? So, before you even start the conversation, it's crucial to get yourself in the right headspace, one that's open, compassionate, and ready to connect. But here's the tricky part, there are some common traps that can mess with your mindset, and if you're not careful, they can really sabotage the whole feedback process. These traps are sneaky because they're so easy to fall into without even realizing it. But once you know what to watch out for, you can avoid them and keep your feedback on track. The first mindset trap we need to talk about is what I like to call delivering a script. Now, I get it, when you're preparing to give feedback, especially if it's about something sensitive, it's tempting to rehearse exactly what you're going to say. You might even have it all mapped out in your head, word for word, like a script. But here's the problem with that: when you're too focused on delivering your lines perfectly, you lose sight of what's most important, the person in front of you. You're so busy trying to remember what you wanted to say that you're not really listening to how they're responding or paying attention to their body language. It's not that preparing is bad, it's actually really smart to think through what you want to say before you say it. But the key is to approach the conversation with a flexible mindset. Be ready to adapt based on how the conversation is going. If you're too rigidly stuck to your script, you risk missing out on the natural flow of the conversation, and you might end up coming across as insincere or disconnected. So, instead of thinking of your feedback as a speech you need to memorize, try to see it as a dialogue. Be prepared, but also be open to where the conversation might take you. Listen actively, respond thoughtfully, and don't be afraid to go off script if that's what the moment calls for. This way, you're more likely to form a genuine connection with the person you're giving feedback to, which makes it more likely that your feedback will be well received. The second mindset trap is a little more subtle, but it's just as important to avoid. It's when you find yourself siding with the problem instead of siding with the employee. Here's what I mean by that: whenever there's an issue that needs feedback, there are really three parties involved: you, the employee, and the problem itself. The problem is what you're both trying to solve, but sometimes, without even realizing it, you might start to see the problem as something that's tied directly to the employee. When that happens, it can feel like it's you and the problem on one side, and the employee on the other. That's a pretty isolating place for the employee to be, and it's definitely not where you want them. Let me give you an example. Let's say an employee has been consistently missing deadlines, and you need to address it. It's easy to go into that conversation thinking, this employee is the problem, and your feedback ends up feeling like an attack. But what if you flipped that mindset? Instead of seeing the employee as the problem, see the problem as something you and the employee are both working on together. It's not you versus them, it's us versus the problem. When you approach feedback this way, you're more likely to build trust and get a better outcome. The employee feels like you're on their side, which makes them more open to listening and engaging with your feedback. They're not going to feel defensive because they know you're both aiming for the same goal, solving the problem. This leads us to the last mindset trap, and it's a big one: forgetting that people can change. This is probably the most dangerous trap because if you fall into it, you're almost guaranteeing that your feedback won't have any positive impact. Here's why: if you go into a feedback conversation thinking that the person you're talking to is incapable of change, then what's the point? You're basically setting yourself up to fail before you even start. It's easy to fall into this trap, especially if you've been dealing with the same issues with someone over and over again. Maybe they're stubborn, or they're just not detail-oriented, and it's driving you nuts. But here's the thing: those are behaviors, not fixed traits. People can change their behaviors, but only if they believe they can and if they have the support and guidance to do so. When you're giving feedback, you need to approach it with a mindset that's compassionate and forgiving. Don't make harsh, absolute statements like, "You're always so careless," or, "You never pay attention to details." Those kinds of statements don't leave any room for improvement, they just make the person feel bad about themselves. Instead, focus on the specific behaviors you've noticed and talk about the impact those behaviors have. For example, you might say, "I've noticed that there have been a few times when details were missed, and it's led to some problems with the project. Let's talk about how we can make sure that doesn't happen going forward." By framing it this way, you're not attacking the person, you're addressing the behavior. And more importantly, you're opening the door for change. You're saying, this is something we can work on together, rather than, this is just who you are, and it's a problem. So, let's bring it all together. When you're giving feedback, you want to adopt a mindset that's flexible, compassionate, and forgiving. Avoid the trap of sticking to a script, and instead be open to where the conversation might lead. Don't side with the problem, side with the employee and work together to solve it. And most importantly, remember that people can change. Approach the conversation with the belief that your feedback can help them grow and improve. When you do this, you're not just giving feedback, you're building trust, strengthening relationships, and helping your team members reach their full potential. That's the kind of feedback that really makes a difference. We've all been there, you want the best for your employee, but when it comes time to give feedback, things can go south pretty quickly. Instead of helping, the conversation might end up with a frustrated you, an employee who feels attacked, and the same problem still hanging around like an unwanted guest. So, how do you bridge that gap between wanting to help and actually making a positive impact? Here's the big takeaway: you need to make your good intentions crystal clear. It's not enough to just have good intentions in your head, you've got to vocalize them. You might think it's obvious that you want your employee to succeed, but don't assume they see it that way. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, of course, they know I'm rooting for them. But the truth is, they might not. And when feedback starts to feel like criticism, it's hard for anyone to believe that the person delivering it has their best interests at heart. So, step 1 is simple: let your employee know, upfront and in no uncertain terms, that you're in their corner. You might feel like you're stating the obvious or even overdoing it, but trust me, it's worth it. Just saying something like, "I want you to know that I'm here to help you succeed," can go a long way in setting a positive tone for the conversation. Now, let's dive into why this is so important. You've probably heard the phrase, "don't shoot the messenger," right? It's that idea that people often get upset with the person delivering bad news, even if that person isn't the one who caused the problem. Well, this isn't just a saying, there's actually some research backing it up. In one study, participants took part in a random draw to win a small bonus. Even though they knew the draw was totally random, the ones who didn't win ended up disliking the researcher who drew the number and told them they weren't getting the bonus. Pretty irrational, right? But it's a natural human reaction. But here's where it gets interesting. In another part of the study, when the researcher made a point of saying that they were trying to draw a winning number for the participant, people's attitudes toward the researcher completely changed. Even if they still didn't win, just knowing that the researcher was rooting for them made a big difference in how they felt. This tiny bit of transparency about intentions had a huge impact. So, how does this relate to giving feedback? When you're about to deliver feedback that might not be what your employee wants to hear, they're naturally going to have some negative feelings toward you. That's just how it goes. But if you start by clearly stating your good intentions, something as simple as, "I'm giving you this feedback because I really want to see you succeed," you're already diffusing some of that negativity. You're putting it out there that you're on their side, which makes them more likely to be open to what you're saying. But don't stop there. You can take it a step further by acknowledging their worries and concerns. This is about showing that you're not just thinking about the work, but you're also thinking about them as a person. It's one thing to say, "I want you to succeed," but it's another to show that you understand what they might be feeling or worrying about. This kind of empathy can really strengthen the connection between you and your employee, making your feedback much more effective. Let's say, for example, you have a young employee who's the newest and youngest member of the team. Maybe she's worried that her contributions aren't being taken seriously because of her age or lack of experience. When you give her feedback, you can acknowledge this concern directly. You might say something like, I know you've mentioned feeling like it's tough to be heard in meetings because you're newer to the team. Let's work on making your presentations even stronger so that your ideas really stand out. By framing your feedback this way, you're not just offering advice, you're linking it to something she cares deeply about. This shows that you're paying attention to her as a person, not just an employee. When you make your good intentions clear and acknowledge your employees' concerns, you're setting the stage for a much more positive and productive feedback session. Your employee is more likely to trust that you have their best interests at heart, which makes them more open to hearing what you have to say and more motivated to take action on it. In the end, effective feedback isn't just about what you say, it's about how you say it and how you approach the conversation. It's about building trust, showing empathy, and making sure your employee knows you're in their corner. When you do that, you're not just giving feedback, you're empowering your employees to grow, succeed, and feel confident in their roles. And that's the kind of outcome we're all aiming for, isn't it? Let's talk about the art of listening, especially when it comes to giving feedback. Now, here's something most people don't realize. The hardest part of giving effective feedback isn't what you say or how you say it, it's how well you listen. Yeah, really. Listening is the secret sauce that makes all the difference. Think about the people who are truly great at their jobs. Across the board, the ones who excel are often the best listeners. This isn't just for jobs where listening is obviously important, like being a doctor or a salesperson. Even managers at fast food chains who are good listeners tend to have fewer accidents at their locations. That's because listening well is about more than just hearing words, it's about truly understanding the people around you, which leads to better outcomes all around. But here's the thing, while there's tons of advice out there on how to be a better speaker, whether it's public speaking or just nailing a one-on-one conversation, people don't talk nearly as much about how to be a better listener. It's almost like listening is taken for granted. But if you really want your feedback to hit home, you've got to listen first. And not just any kind of listening, but a specific type that I'm going to dive into right now. So, the big takeaway here is that you need to listen relationally, not critically, and make sure to validate your employees' feelings. First off, let's talk about the different types of listening. Most managers, especially if they've been around the block a few times, are pretty good at critical listening. That means they're sharp at picking up on the details and spotting inconsistencies, or to put it bluntly, having a good BS detector. That's great in some scenarios, but it's not going to do you any favors when you're giving feedback. What you need in those moments is relational listening, which is all about understanding where the other person is coming from. It's about empathy rather than judgment. When you practice relational listening, you're creating a space where the other person feels secure and less stressed. This is crucial because if your employee is relaxed, they're going to be a lot more open to hearing what you have to say. It also shows them that you care about them as a person, not just as a cog in the machine. They're more likely to trust you, and that trust is the foundation for any feedback you give to really sink in. Now, I get it, some people are naturally better at this kind of empathetic listening than others. But here's the good news, you don't have to be a natural-born therapist to do this well. You just have to show that you're making the effort to understand. That effort, in itself, can work wonders. And one of the best ways to channel this effort is through validating the other person's feelings. Let's break that down a bit. Validating someone's feelings doesn't mean you have to agree with everything they're saying. It just means acknowledging that their feelings are real and that you get why they feel that way. Imagine an employee comes to you and says they feel like they're working harder than anyone else in the office. Your first instinct might be to set the record straight, maybe you even work longer hours yourself, and you're tempted to point that out. But don't go there. Instead, try saying something like, "I understand why you're feeling frustrated," or "I can see how that would feel overwhelming." It's not about whether their perception is 100% accurate. What matters is that you're recognizing their emotions and showing that you care. Once you do that, you've opened the door to a much more productive conversation. Your employee will feel heard, and that makes them much more likely to listen to the feedback you give them afterward. It builds trust, and with trust, you can tackle the tough stuff together without things getting overly defensive or tense. In essence, the quality of your feedback depends on the quality of your listening. You can have the most perfectly crafted feedback, but if the person on the other end feels like you haven't truly heard them, it's not going to stick. So, make listening your priority. Approach the conversation with empathy, validate their feelings, and watch how much more effective your feedback becomes. Let's talk about one of the most enjoyable parts of being a manager, giving praise. It's that moment when you get to recognize someone's hard work, make their day a little brighter, and reinforce the positive behaviors you want to see more of. It's rewarding for both you and your employee. Honestly, who doesn't love hearing that they're doing a great job? It's a win-win all around. So, here's the deal: if you want to be an effective manager, you've got to get comfortable with the idea of giving out more praise than you probably think is necessary. It might surprise you, but most people feel like they don't get enough recognition at work. According to a 2011 GlobalForce survey, only about 1 in 4 workers in the US feels they're adequately praised on the job. That's a pretty low number when you consider how much effort people put into their work. You might be hesitant, though. Maybe you're worried that if you dish out too much praise, your employees might start tuning you out or think that you're just being overly nice without any real substance behind it. You might even fear that being too generous with your praise could undermine your authority. But here's the thing: praise doesn't have to be insincere or over the top. It's all about being thoughtful and strategic with how and when you deliver it. The key takeaway here is simple: be generous with your praise, especially when it comes to what we'll call we strengths, the kinds of contributions that lift up the entire team. Let's unpack that a bit. There's a ton of research out there showing that employees who receive regular praise are more engaged and motivated. They're more likely to go above and beyond, which, in turn, leads to even more opportunities for praise down the line. It's like a virtuous cycle: today's praise plants the seeds for tomorrow's high performance. So, how can you make sure you're getting the most out of this positive feedback loop? First and foremost, you should start by giving more praise than you think is necessary. A lot of managers believe they're already doing a good job of this. Around 80% say they frequently express appreciation. But here's the kicker: less than 20% of employees actually feel that they receive enough appreciation. There's clearly a disconnect, and it's up to you to bridge that gap. To give you some perspective, research from the University of Michigan found that the highest performing teams received about 5.6 pieces of praise for every 1 piece of criticism. That's a pretty strong argument for ramping up your efforts in the praise department. The goal isn't to be fake or to praise every little thing, but to recognize meaningful contributions frequently and sincerely. Now, let's talk about what you should be praising. Not all praise is created equal, and the best managers know how to target their recognition effectively. One really useful way to think about this is by distinguishing between me strengths and we strengths. Me strengths are the things that an individual loves to do and is naturally good at. These are often the tasks that give people personal satisfaction and a sense of accomplishment. For example, maybe you have an employee who's amazing at designing PowerPoint presentations. They're in their element when they're creating slides, and they probably don't need a ton of external validation to feel good about that work. They enjoy it, and that's enough of a reward on its own. On the other hand, we strengths are the qualities and actions that benefit the entire team or organization. These are the behaviors that help everyone succeed, like someone who's great at leading meetings, fostering collaboration, or bringing people together to reach a consensus. These are the kinds of contributions that can sometimes go unnoticed if you're not paying attention, but they're absolutely essential to the health of the team. We strengths are where your praise can have the biggest impact. Because they're not always as immediately rewarding as me strengths, it's important to shine a light on them. When you see someone using their we strengths to elevate the team, call it out. Let them know that you see what they're doing and that it's making a difference. This kind of recognition not only reinforces those positive behaviors but also helps to build a culture where teamwork and collaboration are valued and celebrated. And here's a tip: this approach is especially important for new or less experienced employees. They might not yet be fully aware of how their actions impact the larger team, so your feedback can help guide them in the right direction. When you praise them for their we strengths, you're not just recognizing their contributions, you're also teaching them about the values that matter in your organization. It's a great way to set the tone and lay the groundwork for future success. In summary, if you want to be an effective leader, don't hold back on the praise. Be generous with it, especially when it comes to recognizing the strengths that help the whole team thrive. Your employees will feel valued, they'll be more motivated to do great work, and you'll create an environment where everyone is encouraged to bring their best to the table. It's all about creating that positive feedback loop where good work leads to more good work, and that's the kind of workplace everyone wants to be a part of. Let's talk about one of the most enjoyable parts of being a manager: giving praise. It's that moment when you get to recognize someone's hard work, make their day a little brighter, and reinforce the positive behaviors you want to see more of. It's rewarding for both you and your employee. Honestly, who doesn't love hearing that they're doing a great job? It's a win-win all around. So, here's the deal: if you want to be an effective manager, you've got to get comfortable with the idea of giving out more praise than you probably think is necessary. It might surprise you, but most people feel like they don't get enough recognition at work. According to a 2011 GlobalForce survey, only about 1 in 4 workers in the US feels they're adequately praised on the job. That's a pretty low number when you consider how much effort people put into their work. You might be hesitant, though. Maybe you're worried that if you dish out too much praise, your employees might start tuning you out or think that you're just being overly nice without any real substance behind it. You might even fear that being too generous with your praise could undermine your authority. But here's the thing: praise doesn't have to be insincere or over the top. It's all about being thoughtful and strategic with how and when you deliver it. The key takeaway here is simple: be generous with your praise, especially when it comes to what we'll call we strengths, the kinds of contributions that lift up the entire team. Let's unpack that a bit. There's a ton of research out there showing that employees who receive regular praise are more engaged and motivated. They're more likely to go above and beyond, which, in turn, leads to even more opportunities for praise down the line. It's like a virtuous cycle: today's praise plants the seeds for tomorrow's high performance. So, how can you make sure you're getting the most out of this positive feedback loop? First and foremost, you should start by giving more praise than you think is necessary. A lot of managers believe they're already doing a good job of this. Around 80% say they frequently express appreciation. But here's the kicker: less than 20% of employees actually feel that they receive enough appreciation. There's clearly a disconnect, and it's up to you to bridge that gap. To give you some perspective, research from the University of Michigan found that the highest performing teams received about 5.6 pieces of praise for every 1 piece of criticism. That's a pretty strong argument for ramping up your efforts in the praise department. The goal isn't to be fake or to praise every little thing, but to recognize meaningful contributions frequently and sincerely. Now, let's talk about what you should be praising. Not all praise is created equal, and the best managers know how to target their recognition effectively. One really useful way to think about this is by distinguishing between me strengths and we strengths. Me strengths are the things that an individual loves to do and is naturally good at. These are often the tasks that give people personal satisfaction and a sense of accomplishment. For example, Maybe you have an employee who's amazing at designing PowerPoint presentations. They're in their element when they're creating slides, and they probably don't need a ton of external validation to feel good about that work. They enjoy it, and that's enough of a reward on its own. On the other hand, strengths are the qualities and actions that benefit the entire team or organization. These are the behaviors that help everyone succeed, like someone who's great at leading meetings, fostering collaboration, or bringing people together to reach a consensus. These are the kinds of contributions that can sometimes go unnoticed if you're not paying attention, but they're absolutely essential to the health of the team. Strengths are where your praise can have the biggest impact. Because they're not always as immediately rewarding as strengths, it's important to shine a light on them. When you see someone using their strengths to elevate the team, call it out. Let them know that you see what they're doing and that it's making a difference. This kind of recognition not only reinforces those positive behaviors but also helps to build a culture where teamwork and collaboration are valued and celebrated. And here's a tip: this approach is especially important for new or less experienced employees. They might not yet be fully aware of how their actions impact the larger team, so your feedback can help guide them in the right direction. When you praise them for their strengths, you're not just recognizing their contributions, you're also teaching them about the values that matter in your organization. It's a great way to set the tone and lay the groundwork for future success. In summary, if you want to be an effective leader, don't hold back on the praise. Be generous with it, especially when it comes to recognizing the strengths that help the whole team thrive. Your employees will feel valued, they'll be more motivated to do great work, and you'll create an environment where everyone is encouraged to bring their best to the table. It's all about creating that positive feedback loop where good work leads to more good work, and that's the kind of workplace everyone wants to be a part of. Let's dive into something really important when it comes to managing a team: keeping regular check-ins with your employees. You might think that variety is the spice of life, but when it comes to feedback, surprises are the last thing you want. Picture this: you're having an evaluation with an employee, and they suddenly realize that your perspective on their performance is completely different from what they thought. That moment of shock and confusion? It's something you definitely want to avoid. So how do you avoid those uncomfortable surprises? It's actually pretty straightforward: just make it a habit to check in with your team regularly. You might feel like you're repeating yourself or stating the obvious, but trust me, it's far better to over-communicate than to leave anyone guessing about where they stand. These regular check-ins don't just make your employees happier and less stressed, they also make your job easier in the long run. When you stay on top of how everyone is doing, you can address any small issues before they snowball into bigger problems. The key takeaway here is simple: to avoid surprises, check in with your employees regularly. It can be easy to let evaluations slide when you're busy with other tasks, but staying on top of them is crucial. Imagine trying to give feedback on something that happened nearly a year ago. By then, the details are fuzzy, and the impact of that feedback is greatly diminished. That's why it's important to keep evaluations timely and relevant. Let's break it down a bit. While coaching should be happening on an ongoing basis, think of it as more immediate and frequent. Evaluations need to be less frequent, but still regular. A good rule of thumb is to have an evaluation check-in every 6 months. This helps ensure that both you and your employee are on the same page regarding their performance. And if an employee is in line for a promotion or new responsibilities, you should be checking in even more often, every 3 months, ideally. This helps you track their progress and give them the feedback they need to keep improving. Now, if you have an employee who's falling short in some areas, it's even more important to keep the lines of communication open. Let them know right away if something needs to be addressed. Don't wait until the next official evaluation. By checking in regularly, you can give them the opportunity to course-correct before things get too far off track. This kind of proactive communication is key to helping your employees succeed. When it comes to new employees, or those who are on a performance improvement plan, even more frequent check-ins are necessary. New hires need time to adjust to their roles and the company culture, but they should have a good sense of where they stand after their first month. For those who are underperforming, a weekly check-in might be necessary. This gives you the chance to offer regular coaching and support, helping them get back on the right path. During these check-ins, it's important to make sure that both you and your employee leave the conversation with a clear understanding of what was discussed. It might feel a bit repetitive, but it's worth taking a minute to have your employee summarize their top 3 takeaways from the conversation. This helps ensure that you're both on the same page and that there's no room for misunderstanding. A simple, non-condescending way to do this is by saying something like, "We've covered a lot today, can you summarize your top 3 priorities going forward?" This also gives you one last chance to set a concrete, measurable goal for improvement, if needed. These regular check-ins do more than just keep your employees informed about where they stand, they also show that you're invested in their success. When you consistently take the time to offer feedback, both positive and constructive, you're demonstrating that you care about their growth and development. This builds trust and makes it more likely that your employees will be open to feedback, even when it's not what they want to hear. On the flip side, when you don't check in regularly, you're setting yourself and your employees up for potential disappointment and frustration. Without consistent feedback, small issues can fester and grow into larger problems. By the time you get around to addressing them, your employee might feel blindsided, and the relationship could suffer as a result. Regular check-ins help you avoid these pitfalls and keep things running smoothly. To sum it up, regular check-ins are a simple but powerful tool in your management toolkit. They help you avoid surprises, keep your employees on track, and build a culture of open communication and continuous improvement. Whether it's a quick weekly chat or a more formal evaluation every few months, these conversations are essential for maintaining a productive and positive work environment. So don't skip them, your employees will thank you, and you'll find that managing your team becomes a lot more straightforward. Let's wrap up with the essentials on giving feedback. Feedback is a powerful tool for both motivating your team and evaluating their performance, so getting it right is crucial. When you're delivering feedback, your main goal should be to make it clear that you're on their side. First off, know what you want to achieve from the conversation. Are you looking to offer praise, provide coaching, or give an evaluation? Each of these requires a different approach, so being clear on your goal helps guide the discussion. Listening is also key. You need to listen relationally, not just critically. That means understanding where the other person is coming from and seeing things from their perspective. It's about empathy, not judgment. Here's a practical tip for making feedback conversations more effective: ask more, tell less. This approach helps build trust and shows that you're genuinely interested in what your employees have to say. When you ask follow-up questions, it demonstrates engagement and helps you dig deeper into the issues at hand. However, be careful with the types of questions you ask. Avoid starting questions with "why," as these can make people feel defensive. Instead, go for "what" questions. For example, try asking, "What's the real challenge here for you?" This kind of question helps uncover the core of the problem and allows you to offer better coaching and support. In summary, to give effective feedback, always make sure you're on the same team as your employees, be clear about your goals for the conversation, and focus on listening and asking thoughtful questions. This will help you build stronger relationships and drive better results. Thank you, friends. Let's Talk by Therese Huston. Book summary: I hope you will learn a lot from this book or note down a lot of important points so that you can live a better life if you note down all these things. If you have forgotten, then sit back comfortably with paper and pen or watch the video once again or understand each and every point very carefully which has been said. One point can be very life-changing for you. How did you like this book summary? Please let us know in the comments. Thank you so much.